Hello and welcome back to Simple Living Suffolk, my YouTube channel where I, Tilly, talk about books. You might be able to tell I'm very poorly. I've got a blanket on and everything and my pyjamas on underneath this. I really didn't think I'd get to film a video this week. However, after a week and a half of being off of work with my kid and my boyfriend, he's back at work today and she's gone out, so this is my first chance to be in the house on my own to record a video. So, shall we get on with it? Let's talk about my 2024 wrap up. Let's do my top 10. What my top 10 favourite books of 2024. So, I've written it all down here. I read 50 books in total. My target was 26 because, as I've said before, I'm doing a master's degree and I didn't think I'd be able to read that many. And I managed to read 50, which I was really impressed by, most of them in the second half of the year when I didn't have any uni modules. I read 16,532 pages, give or take. Some of that includes like some books I audio booked part of and read part of, and I think I probably recorded it as pages. It's not quite right, but that's about how many I did. So, shall we talk about my top 10? At number 10, so I don't have a lot of them, but at number 10 is Infamous by Lex Croucher. So this is basically lesbian Bridgerton. The front says, Bridgerton's wild little sister, so much fun. It's basically friends become lovers. It's two ladies who are fall in love. It's a romance, I suppose, but then also one of them like has a tryst with a writer, very like Keats-esque, Byron-esque writer, and it's just very cute. Like, you don't often get Bridgerton style like historical romance books which are queer, so I really enjoyed that. I rated it 5 stars. I'm not going to say all my ratings. I'm pretty sure all my top 10 were 5 stars. So that is number 10. Number 9 is Unruly, A History of England's Kings and Queens by David Mitchell. So that is one that I audiobooked the entire thing, and I was listening to it when I was at a conference in Brighton, and I would like listen to it while I was walking to the conference and I would be cackling out loud. I mean, I love history in general, but he just made it really funny, and there were just some great little dialogues, like monologues that he went off on. So I really enjoyed it, and I think it's the only non-fiction to feature in my top 10. Number 8 was The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana, and that was a library book, and it was, I suppose, magical realism, a world where there are witches. But it's kind of set in real world, and it was set in rural Norfolk, which is near me, and they have like a day trip to Norwich, and it's basically a 20-something witch who gets this job as a nanny to teach these 3 young witches how to control their powers. And it's just very cosy, comfy, lovely. I gobbled it up, I remember just loving it. Number 7 is Sunburn by Chloe Michelle Howarth. This was a read for my Super Gay book club, and it starts in the 1980s and goes on to the early 1990s, and it follows a teenage girl learn about her sexuality and have a relationship with a woman, and it's just kind of like following coming to terms with sexuality in a rural community. So yeah, it was great. And I've talked about it before, so I'm not going to go into loads of detail on that, but I loved it. Number 6 is The Water Cure by Sophie Mackintosh. So this is a dystopia. I've read Cursed Bread by Sophie Mackintosh last year, I think, for an old book club. And I read this one, and it's kind of like, it's dystopia. These young girls are living on what they think is an island with their parents, and then something happens to their parents and like new people come onto the island, and it kind of just follows them and sees what happens. It's quite a short one, but really short and sweet. So 250 pages about. But I'm going to read Blue Ticket next year, which is the other Sophie McIntosh book that I haven't read yet. Number 5 is Circe by Madeline Miller, which was another library book. I picked it up randomly when I popped in there to return a book the other day and loved it. It's my first step into Greek mythology, and I found it really interesting. So it follows Circe, the son of Helios, the sun god. And it follows, so as like an infinite titan who's got like thousands of years of life, it follows a long period of her life. However, my favourite part is not much happens for a big portion of her life, and then so much happens in this space of like 20 years. And it kind of shows that it's not the years in your life, it's how you use them and what happens in those years. And also she has a child and raises that child on her own. And it's just a lovely portrayal of single parenthood. There's a point where she talks about her kid being a nightmare baby, and wanting someone to share in the stress with, I suppose. And then there's a bit where her kid's just lovely and gives her cuddles, and she just wants someone to enjoy the cuddles with. And then the kid grows up and moves away, and she then struggles with losing her child and who she's put her whole life towards. And as someone who's raised a child of my own for the majority of her life, I absolutely know how that feels. And now that she is 14, I am like getting closer to that feeling of her leaving. So it was very relatable to me. So number 4 is Sarah J. Maas, Kingdom of Ash. I started this series last year. It's a 9-book series, and I read 4 of them this year. So I finished Queen of Shadows, and then there was a dual read, a twin read of Empire of Storm and Tower of Dawn, because they run at the same time. And then this was the last one in the series. So this kind of represents the whole series, but also just this book particularly was just great. It brings back in all of these like small side characters you don't know like were that relevant. And also you hear like you get like a nice conclusion for all of them. Like there was no loose threads, it was all tied up in a nice bow, which was wonderful. And there were just like points where I was sobbing. So that's number 4. Number 3, 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. So this is, I suppose, a classic or a modern classic, I'm not sure. It's relatively modern. So this is again magical realism, and I've seen on, I think it's Emmy on YouTube, who has talked about loving this book before. So I decided to read it. I'd had it for ages and I loved it. It kind of follows how many generations? It follows multiple generations of a family. If you can see, I've scribbled all over it. But it follows 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It follows 5 generations of a family and their lives. And it's quite confusing because a lot of them have all got the same names. But it's very interesting. Like, it's a bit weird at points. And there are definitely like some strange things going on. Not in terms of magical realism, but just in like moral things, like incest and stuff. I wouldn't say it's perfect, but it's a very good book, very interesting. I really enjoyed it. And I read that at the start of the year and it stuck with me. Number 2 is This Is How You Lose the Time War by Max Gladstone and Amal El Motar. I'm really sorry if I butchered that pronunciation. This was another book for Special Gay Book Club. And a lot of people didn't like it. I loved it. It was very literary. That's a polite way of putting it. It is quite pretentious, I suppose, in some of the ways it's written. It's a bit unnecessarily posh and like trying to sound fancy, but genuinely I really loved it. and it's sci-fi following like two separate factions, and then there's one person from each faction, and they're kind of like constantly meeting across the timeline. And it's a bit confusing how the time works, but I kind of understood it because I'm a big Doctor Who fan. So it's like wibbly wobbly, timey wimey, and also like Loki and like the multiverse in Marvel. So it kind of made sense to me because I was like, well, they're just, you know, up and down the timeline. And I just really liked that idea, and that it all tied into each other at the end. And it, again, that was a really short one. I don't have that because I got it from the library, so I'll insert a picture somewhere. But yeah, that was I really loved it. Also, it was queer, which we love. And then, number one. Should I be allowed to put my number one as a reread? Yes, and I don't care. My number one was The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Is this the most literary book? No. Is it objectively the best book? Maybe not. Was it my favourite? Yes. I reread this. As you can see my tabs, I'm not necessarily a tabber. I sometimes write notes in books, but generally I don't tab or anything. But I've tabbed this up because I've actually read it in January, I think, for an essay at uni. So I was doing a module called Queer Culture and Queer Media. No, Queer Cultures and Queer History. And I think, and the module, I had to write an essay, I think about, can I remember, a book, a TV show, representation of queerness within it, I believe, or like something historical. Anyway, I picked this because I've read it before and I had already read it and I knew I loved it, and it's great. I love the representation of bisexuality in it. So I picked it to write my essay on. Not only did I get a distinction, yeah, baby, but when I was reading this, I was enjoying it so much that I was like bawling with tears and like gobbling up, and I was like trying to remind myself that I had to actually pay attention and like highlight parts of it and think about it for an essay. But yeah, it was stunning. I love it, and actually the fact that I love it so much and it was a reread made me think that in 2025 I would like to do some more rereads. So they were my top 10, of which I've got 5 here, and then the rest I got from the library or audiobooks. They were my top 10. But I would also like to do a special shout out to A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. Oh my God, I'm really sorry. Which was, I started it a long time ago. It took me a long time to read. I think I've read like a good third of it, and I found it so seriously like quite distressing that I had to stop reading it and then come back to it. But it was very good and written really well. So I did come back to it and I loved it, but it was so emotionally raw and difficult. And so for a book that made me feel so many feelings and made me cry so much, and that was so good, but so difficult to get through, I have to give it a special shout out. So that's my 2024 wrap up. I haven't decided how many books I'm going to try and read in 2025 because I'm on the second year of my master's degree, so let's see how that goes. But I'm going to have a think about it and have a think about my plans for 2025, and then I'll maybe talk to you about it in next week's video. I hope you enjoyed this one. I'm really sorry that I sound very, very nasally and not very well. I'm now going to edit this in bed and maybe have a nap because I feel awful. Anyway, like and subscribe. See you next time.